So Alanah Pearce, she put out a video about game reviews and all of the 10 out of 10 game reviews that seems like The Last of Us Part 2 were getting. And she wanted to talk about the truth, basically, of whether the reviews were being paid for or not. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about what she got into, but also wanted to add some of my own thoughts on the issue. I've been writing reviews since I've been in uni, which is a long time ago, but at that time I was doing film reviews, so they're kind of similar, but I wanted to bring some of my thoughts on the topic. So let's get straight into it. First of all, she says that the reviews are not paid for, and I would say that I pretty much agree with that. I don't think Sony or Microsoft would be paying for reviews in IGN or Polygon or Kotaku. It's just simply not worth their time because they're looking at the entire market, right? So they would probably they wouldn't be worried so much about just one person's viewpoint. They would be thinking about whether the entire market. So to shift the entire market or shift all of the reviewers' point of view, that would be something very difficult for them to do. Now, I guess I would say that maybe at certain points and in the past, there may have been cases where they were a little bit more pushy on things like, hey, you sure, that review score, you sure that is correct? Maybe there would have been some sort of like communication there, but on the whole, from what I know and listened to over the years from people who've worked at IGN and like a lot of people in the industry, when they've talked about it on their podcasts, they generally say that it's pretty hands off between the publisher and the person who review the game. And I think people are concerned because there are stories about some small publishers, maybe they self-publish the game, when they go, hey, I will pay you like $1,000 if you write a good review. And maybe that happens with very, very small games, but I would say usually for something as big as like The Last of Us Part 2, I would very much doubt that it would even be entertained in terms of paid reviews. And if I was a reviewer there, and I'm sure this would be the case for almost all reviewers, they wouldn't want their integrity questioned, because as soon as you take your a paid review, that's pretty much it. Like you're done. There would be no coming back from that, and that would be a bit of a black mark on your record, because people would always point back and say, hey, remember that Zelda review? They took money for it. Not saying Nintendo paid for reviews, just example there. So I don't think people would get paid for reviews, and I don't think people would want to take the payment. Now we come to the other point of the discussion where there is some concern, but I think it's just put in the wrong way when people say that these reviews are being paid for. Like, how come there are so many like 10 out of 10 reviews? How come it's the scores are like just basically off the chart? And I think that's a thing that kind of to do with, well, two things really. And the first one is, so where does the reviewer actually sit? And people are concerned, like, if there is a consumer and there is a publisher, are you with the consumer or are you with the publisher? Is the review a review anymore, or is it marketing hype? And so, and there's a very grey, blurry line where you read the review and the whole thing is basically just hype for the game. If it's like a 10 out of 10, it ends up being just pure hype, and we don't even know if you are really at that level because everything is just hyperbole. Everything just magnified like 10 times. Um, so I think that there is that concern there from consumers that say, hey, um, I just wanted like a review that accurately reflected the game, but everybody's just gone into hype mode overdrive. So I think that is a concern, and I think they placed that sentiment incorrectly, perhaps, maybe, to say that, oh, look, all of these reviews are paid for, when there is a bit of a concern that there's just too much hype in the review. And then they're concerned that the reviewer is actually leaning towards more of the publisher side rather than, say, back to the consumer side, because they assume that generally the reviewer was always going to be on the consumer side. And they've been, it looks like, with all of these reviews, when they see them as a whole, that The Last of Us Part 2 is getting all of these masterpiece reviews that, oh, look, they're doing marketing work now, basically. They're trying to get us to buy the game. So there's definitely that issue, I think, that you see with a lot of AAA games, where you have like Grand Theft Auto or Zelda. They just kind of all have crazy hyped up reviews. And the other point I wanted to make was that the concept of reviews itself. When I first started doing film reviews, the movie show on SBS in Australia, and that was kind of my guide on what a review was like. And for David and Margaret on the movie show, it all simply came down to whether they liked the movie or not. Yes, there was a tiny aspect of it that was to, I guess, a technical aspect, whether they liked somebody's performance or not, or whether they thought the directing was great or the script and all that sort of stuff. But on the whole, most of the time when they gave the score, it would be whether they liked the movie or not. And they would like blockbusters, they would dislike them, and it wouldn't really affect what they say. They would be very happy to just give a big publisher blockbuster like a 1 star out of 5, for example. And I think when you bring that back into games, that kind of confuses a lot of people, because in games people don't see the whole scale from 0 to 10 being used. And now I know Alanah made this point that most of the games that we play are like 8, 9 and 10, and I think that's fine. Play games that are recommended to me that are 8, 9 and 10 reviewed by IGN or any other site. I'm looking at that from a 0 to 10 perspective. So I'm playing all your 8, 9 and 10 games on a 0 to 10 perspective. So if there's something like, say, for example, Project Cars doesn't play good for me, like on the wheel, then I will very happily give it a 5 out of 10. But a lot of sites, because they play all of these games, then they will rate Project Cars maybe like an 8 out of 10 because they played a lot of bad games. And as the consumer, I don't play a lot of bad games, so I see Project Cars as like a 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10. So then I go, wait, what's going on? Like these review scores are so high. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I think we have to consider the systemic issue of the internet itself, and how YouTube and how all of these, or Metacritic, how all of these things work. Because the fact of the matter is that when everything is, well, globalized, and then all congregating into one source, like say for YouTube or for Metacritic, then the person with the loudest voice, or the person with the funniest voice, or the person who's most interesting ends up getting the most views. So there's always this drive of people outdoing each other in terms of hype or hyperbole. And I think that's a problem in general, with reviews, when you come together all into one site, like say YouTube, then the person at the top ends up getting the most views. Now, that's fine and well for a competitive market, but in terms of what it does to the actual review, that kind of means that a lot of people are thinking about exactly how to get their review watched by a lot of other people. And the way that it's watched by other people is if it's the most entertaining, and they do stupid skits like Gymquisition. So they do anything to get people to watch the video because they know they can't survive if people don't watch their review. And sometimes, you know what, like reviews, how many reviews do we really need in this world? 100, 200, 500? Nobody's going to watch that many number of reviews. And so everybody is kind of trying to outdo each other. And what you get is, well, if we say this is the most amazing game, right, then maybe we'll get fans to jump on board with us. And I think I don't know how to solve this, by the way, but this is a systemic problem of the internet in general, that we have all of these fans congregating or coalescing to specific sites, like say IGN or on YouTube, people on YouTube, for example. So I think that's a bit of a problem because then people kind of, say for a game like The Last of Us Part 2, they will be starting to think how I can, even though I love the game anyway, and that opinion is not incorrect, but how can I amplify that a little bit more? Like, it's not that I'm saying anything false, right? Like, but I just want to say it in the most interesting way possible. And that can kind of lead to these crazily overhyped reviews, 10 out of 10 scores. And in the same token, we also get really bad, when the game is really bad, we get people dogpiling on the game, like Mass Effect Andromeda. I haven't played it, by the way, but it seemed like that was the type of game where all of a sudden people were saying it was just absolutely terrible, and it was like 5 out of 10 type of stuff. And who knows, maybe it was, but I don't really know. All I know is that when I watched all the reviews, everyone was just saying it was the worst thing in the world. There is nuance to all of this. Not everybody likes everything. There should be review scores all over the range, but it just seems like there really aren't. And I think part of that has to do with the reason YouTube is the way it is, Metacritic is the way it is. And Alanah says, well, Metacritic, people, the Sony don't really mind. I think to a certain point, they definitely do mind, especially for something like The Last of Us Part 2, because it's story driven. That has a shelf life as well. So it's not really like GTA 5 where it's got legs forever. It can just keep selling for 5, 6, 7 years. The Last of Us Part 2, if it has this certain amount of time around its launch that people are most interested in it, and then after that, like say 4 or 5 months down the track, people it's not trending as well. So I think, to summarize, I don't think the reviews are paid for. That would be pretty stupid of the reviewer taking the payment, and also Sony, I don't think they would be stupid enough to pay off certain reviewers and certain publications. I don't think they would do that. Number two, where does the reviewer actually sit? Is it with the consumer or is it with the publisher? And I think the publication should actually make that very clear, that if they're going to be consumer based, then they really sit on the side of the consumer, because then a lot of these reviews that turn up as marketing hype, it's hard to tell the difference between what is marketing and what is actually a review. And so if you want to be a reviewer and you want to critique on stuff, then you got to make it very clear that you are in the industry to just critique stuff. And number three, the concept of reviews. So we see a lot of publications like IGN, they tend to use just the 8, 9, and 10 part of the scale, whereas I think most people want to see the whole scale being used, but because IGN plays a lot of games, then and the consumer doesn't play as many games as they do, that it's a little bit distorted. So I think, and also the fact that there is a systemic issue of the internet as a whole, and how people strive for more views by being the most interesting or most loudest or most funny voice. That has an effect on the review itself. So there are my thoughts on the topic. If you like this video, please be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.